Today's podcast is about nutrition, actually archaeological nutrition, and I honestly don't know what that is, but I am really looking forward to finding out.
I want to take a moment to thank the sponsors that make this podcast possible.
I know you may already know from listening to my podcast that I specialize in treating patients with toxic mold exposure. It's become a serious problem for many years as we deal with the hurricanes and floods throughout the country. Even simple bathroom water leaks from a toilet in your home over time can contribute to mold buildup. I can help patients that suffer from the symptoms of toxic mold, but I also rely on the patients getting their current residence inspected so they are not continually being exposed. My go-to person for mold exposure is Joe Reese. Joe is a certified mold inspector with decades of experience. He is super thorough and gives you a straightforward assessment and tells you whether it's safe to live in your home or if there is mold. I should know. I used Joe when I moved to my new home 4 years ago. Fortunately, when I moved in, I smelled an unusual odor in my basement, and I immediately called Joe. He came over with his instruments, and he found the problem. Afterwards, I had remediation, and the problem was solved. Joe does inspections all throughout the country. He welcomes calls to his cell phone at 908-451-4592. You can also reach him by email at jprconsultants7929@gmail.com. Remember, mold in your home is not a good thing, but thankfully it's a problem that can be fixed.
If you've been following the podcast, you may know I practice holistic functional medicine and immunology. In fact, at Mitchell Medical Group, we've been treating chronic fatigue patients for 3 decades. It's critical in this work to have a trusted pharmacy that can compound medications for our sensitive patients' needs. ITC Pharmacy has been our go-to pharmacy the entire time. They can make medications ranging from thyroid hormones to dye-free medications for all of our highly sensitive, even allergic patients. If you or your holistic doctor are looking for these very specific patient medications, you can contact ITC at 888-349-5453. They have licenses throughout the country and can have medications delivered right to your doorsteps. My patients have been so pleased with their service, and you will be too.
My guest today is Lisa Roberts. Now, Lisa is not a physician, but she has established herself as an expert in combining her training as a culinary chef with nutrition. She is currently an instructor at NYU and at Stanford's Be Well program and on the advisory board of Odesso, I'm not sure. I previously interviewed a doctor on this podcast who was a chef, and it was actually one of our most popular episodes. So I hope today's podcast will bring that same interest. Lisa and I actually connected. We have a mutual patient who we are caring for and who said terrific things about her. And I'm hoping that she can share some of her ancient wisdom from her studies as an archaeological culinary specialist. So I'm really pleased to welcome Lisa Roberts to the podcast.
Dr. Mitchell, thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled and honored to be here.
Okay. All right. So I always like to get a little bit of background on people, like figure out why did they go into things, especially like with doctors. I'm always asking them, why did you pick this specialty? You could pick a lot of other things. So I'm going to ask you a similar question. How did you become interested in this field, which we will define in a few moments, of archaeological nutrition and being a chef?
Great question. It's something that I kind of stumbled into, actually.
Okay.
So I had always loved the food and wine experience, even from a very young age. I had my first glass of wine, or sip, I should say, of wine when I was 4 years old. And
early. Okay.
Yeah, I started early. There was always something, but it wasn't just the wine. It was the ritual. It was the history behind it, the stories, the winemaker, as I got older, the terroir. Like I wanted to know everything about it. And then when I went off to college, I that interest really developed, and I started really looking into the food and wine practices and rituals of ancient indigenous cultures. And so that led me to really expanding upon that when I got to graduate school. And I like to say I wrote my master's thesis at Oxford on Dionysus, the Greek god of wine. It was a little bit more it was a little bit more in depth in terms of the archaeological record, but I really started to focus on and specialize in ancient food and wine production.
Yeah, I want to get into that. That does sound fascinating. I just want to ask: were your parents European or something? Because at the beginning, wine is fine. Usually, you think of the French. You always hear, "Oh, they have the kids drinking wine at the table in their teens and stuff like that too." Or are you just good old Americans?
You know what? I guess traditionally we're good old Americans. However, the thing is that wine was always very much a part of my family's culture, and dining out and food. And it was just such a fabric of our lives.
Yeah, it is in so many cultures. We're going to get into that too, because, it is crazy though. And you sometimes think about how, up until recently, in the American way of life, it was, fast foods, eating on the run. It's so antithetical what our ancient cultures did and how they valued mealtime and enjoying a meal. And what does that actually do for your, nutrition? But I want to ask you something, because it was really a little shocking and surprising when you used the word archaeology in your training and stuff. Because, when I think about archaeologists, I think about Margaret Mead and Louis Leakey, who spent their lives in Africa studying chimpanzees and ancient civilizations. Is this something that you ever got involved with, or is it all really more still Western, but using, your studies to find out more about ancient cultures?
You know what? So what I did is that because there was the wine component for me, so everything centered around the Mediterranean. So I did all of my work.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So I looked at so my I was really a classical archaeologist. So Greece and Rome, Egyptians, Turkey. I mean, it took it to North Africa. So it really took me around the Mediterranean. And where I really came to embrace, number one, the Mediterranean eating pattern, but also in my studies, I of course studied Hippocrates, and one of his philosophies was dieta, which is where the word diet derives from in English. And it's this it's this way, it basically translates as way of life.
Well, he was famous for also saying, use food as your medicine. I always see that quote used constantly in books of holistic practitioners. So
very much so. And so I really started to embrace this concept of what does it mean to live well, for health to be a way of life. And it really started taking me to what is beyond nourishment. So nourishment beyond the food that you're actually eating. So backtracking, I had actually, so about 20 years ago, my health really started to tank.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, because you mentioned that even on your webpage. You mentioned it, just for the listeners, you mentioned that you dealt with a lot of medical issues, ranging from anxiety, depression, I think addiction. So yeah, if you're willing to share that, I think the listeners would be very interested to know how you dealt with all of that.
Share that. So as you mentioned, I was facing anxiety, depression, ADD. I had, there was Lyme disease in my family. Obviously not genetic, but we lived on Nantucket and everyone had Lyme disease.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So there was that component. I had digestive issues, fibromyalgia. There was just this cascade of autoimmune conditions, celiac disease. And so what happened was that I made the decision to leave New York, leave Nantucket. I was hosting a wine segment on television. I knew that my health was at a critical place. And so I went out to New Mexico. I went to Santa Fe, and I thought that all the shamans and healers with their smoking wands and 6-foot shafts of crystal would be able to heal me. But what happened was that I rolled my sleeves up in the kitchen and I started to apply what I learned in my studies of ancient and indigenous cultures. And I spent a lot of time studying Native American culture as well, the Inca, the Maya, even though I really specialized in the Mediterranean area. And I started excavating the layers of my own well-being. And at that point, I was moving from being a classical archaeologist / sommelier into becoming the archaeologist of my own well-being. And that is where this journey, this spirit path really emerged. And so I spent a lot of time in the Southwest doing a lot of healing. The desert can certainly do that for you. Learning about even more traditions than I had previously explored. And then I came back to New York. And when I came back to New York, I was sober. And I was living in New York with a whole new set of eyes, a whole new way of experiencing the city. And I really embraced the food as medicine piece. And at the time, it was going to Whole Foods. It was going to the Union Square Farmers Market. I realized that I needed to start eating, for me at the time, organic, because I needed to heal my gut microbiome. This is 19 years ago. This is
I know, right. I mean, I'm busy writing about some of this now, and it's right. I mean, someone like yourself, I mean, a lot of people were doing the work, the practical work years ago, because they realized there was benefit in learning again from these ancient cultures who didn't have all these autoimmune diseases and some of even the mental health issues that we have in modern society.
Exactly. And so I really started. So fast forward, as I was excavating these layers of my own well-being, and I really took myself on this journey of becoming a culinary archaeologist, studying food as cultural artifact, expanding the definition of food, really looking at my living history. So cultural, familial, societal influences with food, health, and lifestyle choices. I mean, clearly, even though I didn't eat McDonald's, I didn't go to Wendy's, like I wasn't eating, pizza. Maybe I went to Two Boots like once a month or something like that. But I wasn't eating and I wasn't living in the right way that was aligned with who I was, who I am. And so I needed to slow down. I needed to take a pause. And I really need to dive into my own health story. I needed to take a look at where some of the somatic aspects had lodged themselves into my being, into my spirit, into my body. And as you know, trauma, PTSD, hormonal changes, of course, addiction of any sort, stress, your cortisol levels, all of it impacts your microbiome.
Sure. Let me ask you this. As I mentioned in the introduction, obviously we're not going to use a name. We have a mutual patient, and she's very bright and articulate and smart. So I'm curious what you do and your approach with a patient like that. And the reason I'm going to just prelude it with this, I've talked about in the podcast a lot, my background, I call it sometimes as the Venn diagram between the holistic community and the conventional. I'm in both worlds. And it has given me a lot of advantages because in the conventional world, I can do lab testing, do any kind of radiological things, order medications if I need to. And yet also I've learned so much from people like yourself, other people who I'll never forget who worked in health food stores who were just so incredibly knowledgeable. But I always felt they worked blindly because they couldn't do certain tests and they had to rely on doctors to make sure, somebody's fatigue wasn't due to anemia or iron deficiency or something like that. So I'm curious, with a patient, client, whatever you're going to call them, how do you approach them? Can you just take me through? I'm interested. Like, do you get a medical history or any other special history, like their social history, and sort of a game plan? So let's get specific.
Sure. This is I'm so glad you asked this question.
Yeah.
Because I always find that it's very important to work with the entire medical team.
Right.
And so I'm not just getting a siloed perspective. And so you and I actually spoke, and I spoke with this common patient's other practitioners. And so the process that I take with all of my clients is, number one, we excavate. So I do take a thorough health history.
Okay.
I really look at, and I want to know what their everyday looks like. I don't want to know what the perfect day looks like or the perfect month they had. I don't care about that, because they're usually coming to me because I'm often the last house on the block for a lot of patients, a lot of clients.
Yeah.
Clients, because I'm not a clinician. I don't have a...
Well, it's okay. Don't feel bad. I always call myself the 10th doctor. Patients have been to at least 9 other doctors before they end up in my office. So hopefully it's the last stop on the train.
Right.
But all right. But yeah. So you get a history. And again, I'm looking to see if there's something with this archaeological stuff that's important. Like, again, if you were in this patient that we have, you're just going through her everyday routine. Like, I typically ask patients, of course, I'm getting their history and all their medical problems, but I will typically ask them, tell me your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and et cetera, where do you eat? Are these the kind of things that you're asking these patients?
We touch upon that. That's actually, I want to know about literally every aspect of their life.
Well, what does that mean? Because that's so broad.
Okay. So I want them to take me through every minute of the day, essentially.
Wow. Okay.
From the time they wake up to the time they go to bed, and what they're doing in between their meals.
Okay.
So I want to know that. I want to know who they're talking to.
Why does this help you? Just honestly, because, again, we all have, I don't know how much time you could spend with a new person. Maybe it's an hour, 2 hours. I don't know. I don't know how maybe you can explain. I feel like I spend a reasonable amount of time for a medical doctor, 30 minutes with a patient, a new person, maybe 20 or new. And I do get into things, but I have to guide the patient. I can't let them start telling me about what happened 20 years ago that has no relevance to possibly how I'm going to help them. So how does, I find it a little overwhelming. How do you kind of narrow down what they're telling you about their whole day?
The first thing I ask them is, what lights you up?
Okay.
What brings joy?
Okay.
I also ask them about what their stressors are.
Okay.
What is currently creating stress in their life.
Okay.
Because we're really trying to find the connection between the heart, because so many of us don't go to our heart space.
Okay.
Live up here.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates a lot of cortisol production in our body. And there's something going on in their lives that they're not able to digest. Okay. And so what is it? And that's where the somatic piece comes in, and that start really excavating the layers of their life, where they say, wow, this is working well on this day and in this location, but it's not working well here, and here. Well, let's talk about why that's happening. And so it really is going through layer by layer, and it's time consuming. However, once they start talking, and I'm leading them through this, because I also start to have them implement practices in their life.
Okay.
Bringing in the practice and the ritual piece. because that helps support the changes that they're making. It helps ground them. It helps ground their nervous system, because
Right.
a lot of times that's what's going on. So often, like their nervous system.
So you're not really dealing so much with what they're eating. I mean, I know it sounds like you'll get to that. You're dealing more with the psychosocial aspects of their life, maybe
Really
even
is.
spiritual, which, is also a little bit what a therapist do, but you're approaching it from a different, I think, angle, it sounds like.
Yes. So we start adding in practices, and then we also start adding in, we bring in heart healthy foods. We bring in anti-inflammatory foods. Like we really start looking at, oh, wow, you need to bring down. So let's say I've spoken with a cardiologist, for example, and they need to bring down their saturated fat. But we're looking at what they're eating. They're eating a quote unquote healthy diet.
Yeah.
But maybe they're eating a lot of products made with coconut, and the saturated fat.
Right.
It's plant-based. However, their body happens to overabsorb fat, saturated fat.
Right.
At what point does there aren't tests that will tell you when let's say I overabsorbed fat.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly at what point. So it's something you have to experiment with. You have to investigate that. And so maybe it's cutting the fat that you are having in half, for example. Maybe you're just having, I don't know, 4 too many servings of chicken a week. Seriously. So it becomes really, it really is looking at all these different aspects, and then it's bringing your body back into resonance.
Well, what have you learned? I wanted to bring this up. Again, these are my personal questions. I had read, it was many years ago, there was I don't know if you'd call him an archaeologist or paleontologist. I always forget what the difference really is. But Dr. Melvin Connor was a very well-known professor at Emory. And he published a paper back 15, 20 years ago. He later went on to Harvard Medical School, but he never practiced. It's funny because he got him very interested in medicine. But he published an article about what early man ate. And he basically, kind of said, obviously it was the hunter-gatherer thing, the whole stuff. This was really, people forget now, but that was kind of the beginning, the rise of the paleo diet. Right. But that has gotten really warped, I think, in translation, and people have gone to a lot of extremes. And as I was mentioning to you earlier on, I want to hear your thoughts about this. When I was first in medicine, my first couple of years, and I used to go for lunch, there was a place down the street from me that was a health food store. Now, unfortunately, so many of these stores have closed down because of Whole Foods and everything. They just can't stay in competition with them. And in this store was an elderly woman who would probably be like your shaman type. She was just such an interesting woman. And she had done a lot of healing on herself because she had been very sick and family members have been sick. She used to be there. They had like a little bar where they were serving wheatgrass juice, which I could never get down, but she swore by it. And she had her followers that would come every week to meet with her and consult. And I used to sit down and talk with her because she liked talking to me because I was a young doctor interested in this stuff. And this was really before there was really functional medicine. We are talking about 25, 30 years ago. But one of the things that she said to me when she would sit down and she would draw a picture. She used to draw these very funny cartoon pictures, and she would draw a picture of the mouth, and she would show I think it was the 32 teeth, and showing that there were incisors and that there were flat teeth. And she said, Dean, the reason we have these is that, look, you can come up with whatever diet you want, but we were meant to eat some meat. That's why we have these incisors. And we have the flat teeth because mainly we're supposed to eat plant-based. So I'm wondering, again, putting on your archaeological hat, how do you see this? Again, whether you're dealing with a heart patient or an autoimmune patient, I really want to get your take on the nutritional side, not so much the spiritual and, approach for stress, which I respect, but I want to pin it down to this.
So So in terms of, I'm not that type of archaeologist.
You're not. Okay. All right.
No, I did not study bones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, like then going back to maybe your heart patient, you know, I did work with Dean Ornish, who was very famous for doing the vegetarian diet, but he also, I'll never forget when I went out there in 1994, I was again a young doctor looking to make my mark, to learn more. And I went out to his retreat where he had all heart patients. I was one of the only ones, and my wife were the only ones that were non-patients. We were actually doctors, but I wanted to go through the program to see what it was like. And, you know, so we ate the vegetarian meals, we meditated, we did a little bit of exercise. My wife was 6 months pregnant. She should have killed me. It wasn't the best thing for her. But I'll never forget, you know, at one point I got a hold of Dr. Ornish and I was like saying to him, like, you know, what's the real secret here? Like, how are you getting these people to reverse their heart disease? And he quietly said to me it wasn't the diet. He said it was the stress reduction. It was the group support. And I was like, really? You know, I was disappointed. I was like, thought it was something special, but it always stayed with me. So I think that's what I'm getting that you're saying. But so how do you, let's say we have this patient that has maybe possibly a heart issue or someone else. What are you looking at? That's what I'm trying to find out. What are you looking at that's going to, you know, give you ideas how to help them?
Okay. So I'm going to go back to Hippocrates and this concept dieta. And so it's a holistic approach that considers the whole person. It considers how they move their body.
Okay.
It considers what sort of practices they have around what we call today mindfulness.
Yeah.
So my personal take on it is that we spend way too much time up here and we need to go to our heart space.
Okay.
That's another conversation. It's about eating anti-inflammatory foods. That's our term for it today. So we're looking at olive oil. Olive oil it's been studied. The Mediterranean eating pattern is the most studied pattern in the world.
I agree. When I tell patients, if you had to pick one diet out of and I've interviewed about 10 different people on diets, you know, it seems to always come back to the Mediterranean makes the most sense. And it's quite tasty too.
It's very tasty. There are other traditional eating patterns around the world that are similar too. I mean, everyone's all about the blue zones, right? So you take a look at all of these other traditional eating patterns. They all have a lot of things in common. So going back to olive oil, which is obviously Mediterranean, but it involves the 18 countries that surround the Mediterranean area. The Mediterranean Ocean, the sea, sorry. And it really takes a look, it's looking at real foods. So olive oil with all the polyphenols. You're looking at foods that are rich in flavonoids, that are nitrate rich, all of those. So you're looking at whole fruits and vegetables. You're looking at foods that are rich in probiotics, nuts, seeds, grains. I mean, all of that. You're also then going back to this way of life. In the Mediterranean, we're outside, living outside, connecting with nature. Nature allows us to pause. It also reduces cortisol levels. And it's been documented. There is a concept of biophilia. And then community. What I find about New York City that is so amazing is that there is such a community. Everyone can find a community in New York City. And so I actually think there's a lot of benefit to living in a city.
Do you ever tell patients to move? You know, like New York, as much as it's a very exciting place, I love practicing there. It's a very intense place. Yeah. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of pollution. There's obviously a lot of anxiety. Do you sometimes feel for a patient it's not the right place for them and might recommend that they move?
Without a doubt. I really do believe that another part of creating the practices and the reset and the discover part of what I do with my clients is that we really take a look at what is causing the stress in their lives, as what we talked about at the very beginning. These are really key components because if we're talking about nutrition and we're talking about nutrient assimilation, if your body is in a constant state of stress and your environment is potentially causing that or creating more stress for you, it might be time to reevaluate it. I mean, I've spent a lot of time outside of New York City because I realized that as much as I love it, I need to connect with nature on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'm lucky. My office is about a block 2 from Central Park, and sometimes I need to connect to nature on my lunch break.
That pause.
Yeah. What do you do with institutions like NYU? And maybe you can mention about the Stanford Be Well. What do they ask you to work, help with?
So I go in and I teach I teach on culinary nutrition, essentially. So culinary archaeology. And so so for example, at Stanford, where I've been teaching with the Be Well program for faculty and staff for almost 5 years now.
Who do you teach to? Is it just the general public? Is it to undergraduate students or healthcare workers? Who's your audience?
Doctors, postdocs, physicians, deans, staff. So I have classes with the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery, Neurosurgery, OBGYNs, healthcare workers.
Is it actually like cooking classes or no?
I do both.
Okay.
They really want the practical. They want to be able.
That's what I would think. Right. They don't want to just have a lecture. They could read about that.
It's food as medicine, essentially.
Yeah. Okay.
So a lot of times I will create a slide deck. So one of my most popular classes at Canyon Ranch, at Stanford, and at NYU was a class that I taught called Cooking for Hormonal Well-Being During Perimenopause and Beyond.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Hugely successful, hundreds of.
Yeah, I can imagine there has to be a line. It's an issue for
women, or you are married or partnered with a woman who's going through it, or you have a mother who's going through it. It's it's such a huge life transition. And as you know, with hormonal changes, that impacts the microbiome as well.
So can you give us for our listeners who may be in that state, can you give any couple of tips for them to that you might do at the class?
Yes. So number one, protein is going to be your best friend right now for a lot of women. I realize. So
why is protein their friend? I'm just curious.
One, it's for regulating blood sugar levels.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Right.
So you have that. It's also going to be really important for maintaining muscle mass, because what happens during perimenopause and menopause is that estrogen levels start to decline, and it's not like a nice decline. it's a roller coaster decline. And estrogen acts as it's anti-inflammatory. It acts as an antioxidant, and suddenly you don't have these extra antioxidants flowing through your body. So you need to get it through food. And a lot of my clients will come to me and they'll say, I'm taking more supplements at this stage in my life than I've ever taken in my entire life. And I got to say, so am I. It's just something they want to come down on the number of supplements. However, I will say that I would love for us all to be able to get it 100% through food. However, most of us live lifestyles where we need something that's going to
speed up the process. Yeah. Let me ask you this too. One of the things I'm actually a little bit in the other camp, and not to oppose what you're saying, but I see patients that sometimes come into me with 30, 40, 50 supplements, and obviously they're spending a fortune. And I'm not that thrilled with it at times in certain cases, because what I say to them is that when you take turmeric, and you put it in a capsule, it becomes a pharmacologic thing because the dosing that they're doing. Again, I'm not criticizing what you're saying. It's just my preference. So what I normally tell patients, and I want to hear you again, maybe your secret, like for example, I'll tell them to get the actual spices, and I like, Simply Organic makes a whole range of like ginger, turmeric, and I say sprinkle that on your food. mean, this is what they did in ancient cultures. They did it to preserve food. It obviously, it's an acquired taste. But like, for example, ginger, which I learned from another really good holistic practitioner who wasn't a doctor, the incredible benefits, for circulation, anti-inflammatory from it. And it was really funny once because I ended up finding out I'm not a Japanese sushi guy at all. But I would find when I told patients about this, they go, oh, Dr. Mitchell, it's so funny. They go, when I go to the sushi restaurant, at the end of the meal, they give me a little packet of ginger to like cleanse my palate. And I said, oh, they must have known, the benefits. So are there any particular spices that you really like that, maybe aren't in the, mainstream, like your secret spice?
Oh, sure. I just want to loop back for one.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Supplements. I am by no means saying someone should be on 30 supplements.
No, I didn't say you are. I'm sorry. I did that. I was just saying, I just see that a lot because people come in with a big bag and I'm like, no, you know what it is? I just find their gut can't even absorb all these pills. That's one of the issues.
It's true. And so specifically speaking for women.
But for menopausal women, I could understand that. Sure.
Right, perimenopause and menopause. And that's specifically what I was talking about.
Right.
And because sometimes at this stage in life, for example, I just found out I have osteoporosis. I'm 50. I have been practicing food as medicine for over 20 years.
Right.
And so why would something like that happen? Well, when we're becoming very close to menopause, some of us lose up to 30% of our bone density.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, there are genetic factors at play.
Of course.
And so I have to boost, I have to take extra. I'm not getting enough from my food. Some days I do, some days I don't. It depends on my schedule, right?
Well, I want to just interject for a second. It's one of the things that I have had to deal with a lot. And I think hopefully I can help you and help some other listeners right now. And, one of the things that I found, and this has been really borne out from research, a big mistake for a while was everybody thought they had to take extra calcium supplements. And even Dr. Oz touted this, like 5-10 years ago. And it turns out, and he really knows that at this point they were wrong, that calcium, unfortunately, when you take it, especially as a supplement, gets a lot of times deposited in the arteries, which is not a good thing. But what I do stress to my patients who have osteoporosis is that it's very important to have very good vitamin D3 levels, typically in the 50 or 60, not just above the normal range of 30. And also to make sure that they're taking vitamin K2 in combination with that, as you know, because what happens is, and I explain to the patients every week, that the K2 is fantastic and that it moves the calcium that's in your bloodstream, which you don't really want that to build up, and moves it into your bones. And the other thing from somebody I interviewed, I have the book right here, is really great by William Evans. He used to work with the astronauts at NASA, and what he showed, which is really important, and again, he was a researcher, PhD guy, but a really practical guy, was that certain weight-bearing exercises, and again, for the listeners, something called the heel lift. It's very interesting. I show this to my patients. I'm the kind of doctor, I walk around, I'm busy showing them exercises. I go to the wall and I have them put your hands against the wall, lift up your heels, like to a count of, 4, and then slowly press them down into the ground for a count of 6 and press a little bit. And that Dr. Evans showed stimulated bone growth. They study this on, scans in the hip and the pelvis, which are so important, where unfortunately a lot of the osteoporotic fractures occur. So
yes. I'm so glad that you mentioned all of that. Yes, the weight-bearing exercises, that is so incredibly important. And the reason why I brought up my own osteoporosis,
yeah, sure,
because what happens a lot of times, as you know, as a doctor, is that with these changes, sometimes women are suddenly facing higher levels of anxiety, depression. Yeah. They become at high risk for cardiovascular disease. And so it's for women to be aware of this,
right?
And how we can use food as medicine. And so when I am teaching, I really emphasize prebiotic foods such as fiber. We need a lot of fiber in our diet. So from fruit, apples, berries, pears, vegetables, including asparagus, spinach, leafy greens. It's the spring. We've got lots of spring vegetables happening. Legumes are an excellent source of protein, and they can actually be a really easy snack.
Right.
Chickpeas, lentils, black beans. If you're looking for fiber, you're looking for protein, you're looking for carbohydrates, you're going to get, if you are really short on time, open up a can of chickpeas, drain it, rinse it, put some olive oil on, salt, pepper. If you want to throw in like a cucumber and some tomatoes, you can. But even if you just do the can of chickpeas, you're getting so much more than you.
That sounds delicious. That sounds like the chef in you coming out. It's interesting too. Dan Buettner, who wrote the Blue Zone books, he said the one common theme that he found, again, there's obviously a lot of factors in those centenarians, the people who lived to 100 and who lived well, was eating beans. So
plant-based protein, it's really looking at, and it's so plant-based proteins such as legumes are excellent for helping with vasomotor. So you're looking at hot flashes and so many symptoms women have during this phase of life. And then of course there's other fiber-rich foods such as nuts and seeds and grains, but then also looking at the probiotic foods. And something that came out of Stanford, Christopher Gardner and the Sonnenbergs, is that having rich probiotic foods, including just plain Greek yogurt or Icelandic yogurt. And if you have heart issues and you need to be on a low-fat diet, then choose a non-fat Greek yogurt. It's still really delicious. Or a low-fat cottage cheese that has cultures in it. There's cottage cheese that has cultures and there's cottage cheese that doesn't have cultures. Kefir, miso, kimchi, all of that. Tempeh, it's really great as a probiotic source. And then the healthy fats, so important.
Right. I think, that's another thing too. I'm working on a book that I'm trying, back in the 80s or 90s, everybody was like, fat's the enemy. And it turns out, no, sugar's the enemy, the white devil. And fats, if you pick the right ones, are important for our health and our tissue. If you wouldn't mind telling me, I'm just curious too, because we're getting a little bit toward the end. What would be your typical breakfast, lunch, or dinner if you were my patient? I'm curious what you eat on a regular basis. So if you want to pick today or yesterday, what do you have?
So let's pick today. I had non-fat Siggy's plain Icelandic yogurt.
What is Icelandic yogurt? I'm not saying with Greek.
You know what? It's a
brand?
Just like there's quark, there's Greek yogurt, there's different styles of yogurt.
So this comes from like Iceland or something?
Yeah, it's an Icelandic style. Exactly.
Okay, it probably comes from New Jersey, but they call it Icelandic. Okay.
I just prefer it.
You like it. Okay, sure. Well, that's important. I tell patients, you got to find things that you like, because, I always feel so bad for patients that they come in miserable because they're eating foods that go, I know this is good for me, but I hate it. And like you said, that's telling your body the wrong message. I'm not saying, we don't all love some fries once in a while, but, but eat what you like. I mean, that is important. But okay, so you have your Icelandic yogurt. What else?
Right. Icelandic yogurt, and I love hemp seeds. So I want everything with omega-3s. I do really well with omega-3s. So walnuts and hemp seeds, and then I'll put berries on it. And so that, to me,
that sounds delicious. And what do you do? What do you drink? Do you have tea or coffee? Are you against coffee?
Oh no, I'm a coffee drinker.
Yeah, coffee should be good. It seems to help people. Okay.
Yes. So I have coffee, and sometimes I'm really into collagen these days for bone health.
Yes.
For, skin, all of that. And so I'll throw some collagen in my coffee, or I'll throw it in a glass of water.
Okay.
Then for lunch, so I've really been experimenting, because I work with people at, sometimes I'm going in and I'll work with multilingual high school students who are working with the UN, and they'll come to me and they'll say, what do I eat? What am I going to feed my parents who have type 2 diabetes? So I'm experimenting with getting food sources from different price points. And so canned salmon. So for lunch, I had canned salmon with celery, carrots, olive oil, some chopped herbs, cucumber, and really delicious.
That sounds very healthy. Okay.
I'm getting the omega-3s. I'm also getting the crunch, which I need.
Yes, right. Yeah, that's true. Like, from the culinary side, and I know that because I have people that complain to me. They're like, they miss the experience, whether it's crunchy food, smooth food. That's why I love avocados if people are, telling them, because they, again, a good a little bit high in fat, but it has the good oils and it has like that creamy texture to it, if you smear it on something.
Oh, and I added that. I added the avocado.
Okay.
Let's see here. And then last night I made minestrone soup.
Okay.
And that was delicious. So, and let's see here. Tonight, I am probably going to make a Japanese sweet potato, which is excellent. So if someone is craving carbs, they want something that's warm,
sweet. Yes.
It's a little cool. So Japanese sweet potato is so delicious. You can throw that in the air fryer, or you can throw it in the oven. Like I put it in an oven at 400 degrees an hour before you're ready to eat. And that's really delicious. You can pair that with, you can put an egg on it. You can put avocado with it. You can, I think it's really warming. And
let me ask you this too. This is kind of really, I think, an overall important thing. We live in a world today where a lot of people eat out, they take out, they have Uber Eats, they don't have to go out at all.
Right. And
to me, there is something to preparing your own food. It does take time, and except for doing the dishes, it's the whole thing, the preparation, anticipation, maybe, again, eating with other people. Do you find from, again, your background and studies that these are also so important in aiding your digestion, helping your health?
Without a doubt. I mean, so we were talking about cortisol, and that it actually helps bring down cortisol levels when you are eating in community, sharing. Let's say you're someone who lives alone, right? There's a lot of people who are single for many different reasons. Or you may be a single parent and you have 50-50 custody. And so it's taking care of yourself is such an act of integrity and grace. And it's putting yourself first. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who put everyone else first in their lives. But when you're putting yourself first in terms of your health, you're able to actually show up for the people you love and the things you love the most.
It's interesting. You're saying that I'll never forget when my children were little, and we had a friend, one of my wife's friends, and they had some exchange students that had come from, I can't remember, either Japan or South America. And they stayed with them for like 2 weeks. It was part of the program, and their kids would go over there. And the wife was telling the story. She goes, they were taking them around, and moms today, they're so busy taking kids to soccer practice, to band thing, to this and that. And they were constantly eating in the car. And the exchange students, when they were asked at the end, like, what was their experience? They said, we had such a great time. America, unbelievable. This, that, they goes, but just didn't realize that they ate in the car all the time. So yeah, it's something to think of. Lisa, is there anything else we haven't covered you'd like to mention as we're kind of finishing up here that you think would be really important for the listeners and about your work and how people can find out about you?
So My work is I'm really taking people through I call it a spirit path. It's like it's really moving from what's going on up here into your heart space. And it's really expanding the definition of nourishment and how it becomes a way of life, as opposed to, oh, I need to treat this one aspect. I need to the food, this one food that I'm eating. I mean, you're an allergist, you know that, yes, there is that aspect to it. However, when I'm treating the whole person, when they come to me and they say, I'm ready to start the somatic work, I'm ready to start the journey, I'm ready to really look at where this originated.
How long, and again, I don't want you to pinpoint you, and every person is different, but how long in general, because I have to answer this question to patients, would you say that it takes to make a significant change? 3 months, 6 months, a couple of weeks?
You know what? It really depends on the individual, and say, give yourself 90 days.
Yeah, that sounds like a good amount of time. I think people want to know that there's at least an immediate or finite time if they put this effort in, which you can't always guarantee. And I explain that to them, but I do feel it's reasonable to expect to feel better in 90 days doing this stuff. I know Dean Ornish saw that with his patients that came out to his retreats. And I think in my own practice, I deal a lot with what's called candida overgrowth. And by switching the patients away from a high carbohydrate diet, to a more balanced one, and treating them, that typically within 60 to 90 days, they do feel much better. So, all right.
It's the same for me.
And how can patients find out about you? I know you're on the web, or how do they find out about if they want to get in contact with you?
I am at lisarobertsfood.com. And then on Instagram, Lisa Roberts Food. And then I just started a Substack, and it's Lisa Roberts Food.
Okay, so they're going to find Lisa Roberts Food wherever they go.
Food, right, exactly.
Okay. Well, this was terrific. Thank you so much for joining us and kind of giving us insight into archaeological nutrition.
Yes, Dr. Mitchell, thank you so much. And I so appreciate everything you do.